It's David Coates here from the New Jersey Swim Safety Alliance. We're here with one of our podcasts talking about the basics of adapted aquatics or swimming for people with different abilities. We've got some amazing guests with us. I just want to start off by doing introductions, and then we can get into the meat of the production. Again, I'm Dave Coates. I'm your host. I run an organization called National Safety Training Center. We are a public safety training agency. We do first aid, CPR, but a lot of lifeguarding classes. Next up, I have Amira. Tell us all about yourself, Amira.
My name is Amira Abdul Zahir. I'm in New Jersey. I've been doing aquatics since 15, lifeguarding, starting then the WSI and then LGI. And I've also got my master's in ABA. And I've been working in aquatics, some of the local JCCs and YWCAs, YMCAs.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Eggert. I am a member of the board of directors for NJSSA, and I also own my own swim school and program called Eggert Aquatics. We actually have a full adaptive swim line. So we've been doing that for about 3 years now. I am a WSIT with the American Red Cross. I've also been a swim instructor, an adaptive swim instructor since I was 15 or 16, I should say. I'm an LGI and I love everything about adaptive aquatics. I have my master's in special education and I'm currently a special education school administrator. So it's a topic near and dear to my heart.
Hey everyone, I'm Leanne Day. I started swimming when I was 8 years old. I started swimming year round. I started coaching and teaching when I was 15. And so swimming has been a part of my life forever. I started out as a competitive athlete and a college athlete. But when my daughter was born almost 15 years ago, I saw a severe need for high quality swimming lessons in our area. So instead of working with only national level athletes, I decided to branch out and start North Jersey Aquatics, which is a swim school for kids. Our model right now, we have integration adaptive lessons within our regular program. We do have some private lessons for kids that need that, but our goal is to really integrate them into regular classes with one or two other kids in the room or in the class, and to really provide an opportunity for every child to learn. So what we say is we get to know the child and then develop a curriculum for them, working around obviously the skills we want to do. So as opposed to just saying this is the curriculum and making every child do it, we create a plan that's going to work for that child and their needs. So that's something that is important to me. I was actually originally a teacher and a club coach, and then decided once I started North Jersey Aquatics that I could do swimming full time, and here I am now.
Absolutely amazing. So we have a huge group of subject matter experts in the room. So let's get started and talk about adaptive aquatics, what exactly it is. Lisa, can I get you to start and just give us some definitions around adaptive aquatics? What is this subset of aquatics that we call adaptive aquatics?
Sure. So one of the first things that comes to my mind is inclusion. Depending on what type of lesson you're trying to offer, you're including everybody into the same bucket of lessons, similar to what Leanne does, or you have self-contained lessons, which are just for people with different learning abilities and needs and things like that.
Is there an advantage to having an integrated program versus having a I don't know if segregation is the right word, but a separate program?
Self-contained, yeah.
Self-contained.
So I think the main difference between a self-contained versus an inclusion program, there's a lot of parents out there that want their children to integrate with everybody else. And so if you have a group of 8-year-olds, they want all the 8-year-olds to be together. The difference with the self-contained program is that in a typical class setting, there's a lot of noise. If there's a lot of classes happening in the pool at one time, there's going to be a lot of noise in the pool, a lot of parents in the pool splashing, things like that. You may have some swimmers that are uncomfortable in that environment and would need a self-contained environment. For example, if the noise bothers them or the splashing bothers them, there are some pools that have elements on, mushrooms, slides, things like that. If they're on during swim lessons, they can be a very big distraction. And so a self-contained program might have smaller numbers in their classes or a one-on-one and reduce the noise and find a way so that person can learn comfortably.
Outstanding. Amira, just wondering from your experience, what age range do we start with our definition of adaptive aquatics? Is there a minimum and is there a maximum?
The minimum I have to say 6 months. 6 months going according to American Red Cross. The earlier you get them in the water is better. It reduces fear. It gets them used to the movement of the water, whether it's gen ed or special ed. It definitely 6 months. Maximum age, dude, 90.
Only experience with adaptive aquatics or children with different needs is when we teach lifeguarding programs. Frequently, we'll get children who are on the spectrum. And in general, we've had excellent success teaching these students. They are almost always wicked smart and love to follow direction. So we have enormous success with that particular market. My guess is there are many other sub markets. David, you've got some experience. You're an administrator. What have you seen as the focus of adaptive aquatics in your experience?
So in my experience, I think it all comes down to access, right? So students need the access to that instructor that has that patience. They need access to that instructor in that environment that's going to meet them where they are. So we even see it in the school setting. You need to be able to see why a child or an adult with special needs is acting a different way. What different approaches can you take to teach that child or teach that swimmer? And how can you see them getting in their own way? And what I mean by that is it a sensory concern? Is it the loud noise? Is it the lighting in the room? The pool we currently use for adaptive aquatics is actually has adjustable lights. So when certain swimmers come in, we actually dim the lights and they're still visible to the instructors and it's safe. But that little bit of difference really engages that swimmer and it allows them to overcome that barrier. When you are doing an inclusive adaptive program, which we do to some extent, you're also looking at like, how are you modifying the instruction, right? Are you changing the objective? Are you changing the way the lesson's taught? Are they meeting the same goals or do they need that self-contained swim lesson? I think really being able to see that access point starts with a conversation with the families and kind of getting your eyes on that swimmer for the first time.
To piggyback on that and what Dave said as well, the WSIT, and I'm sure David has run into this as well, you may have students in your classes, WSI candidates, that are different learners. And so it's a matter of how are you then going to accommodate that person in your instructor class so they can be successful as well, whether it being modifying things. For example, on a test, maybe you're reading the test out loud to them. Not that they're taking the test, they're still meeting the objective, they're just meeting that objective in a different way. And there are many different things in order to help that person be successful and tools and tips.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk when we're training WSI candidates, right? So if we're saying in swim lessons, oh, you need to meet the needs of these 3 swimmers in a group class. Well, if we have 6 WSI candidates and they learn in different ways, we need to find where they are. So I completely agree, Lisa.
Amazing. I just want to just ask Leanne a specific question because I think you have some more competitive swimming background. Is there a place for adaptive aquatics within the competitive swim landscape?
Sure, absolutely. I think swimming is a sport that everyone can do regardless of disability or strengths or weaknesses. Just to kind of do a background, we have 6 different locations going right now, and some of them are a 6-lane competitive pool, and some of them are a tiny little hotel pool or backyard pool or whatever it is, where we don't have the opportunity to change all of our things like Dave has at his pool, but I have so many different types of locations that when we get a parent on the phone, we talk to them and say, what can your child do? We do have instructors that are autistic or have needs themselves, and they are some of my best instructors because they understand how to help those kids. So yeah. And in the competitive world, there's Special Olympics, so if they really can't do a typical program, and their needs are that great, they can do Special Olympics swimming. It's a very big one. We actually also have special needs adults that swim in our clinic program. So they come out of like the DDD program, usually using that DDD money to swim with us, and they do clinics once a week, twice a week. And in the competitive world, swimming is a sport that you don't have to worry about other people besides not running into them in the lane. But we find that it's a great sport for kids that might struggle with the communication factor of being on a field. So instead, being in the pool, they really don't have to be able to communicate as well. And so it works really well, and it gets that energy out. It gives them something to feel confident about. So we're very big on that too. Our program kind of is the catch-all in a lot of ways for kids that aren't quite ready to be on a swim team, but we can meet their needs here. So I have found a way to kind of be a different type of program, essentially to help those kids that don't fall into a normal path of just going from lessons to competitive swim. So that's something that is important to me.
So you mentioned a term that I wasn't familiar with. So you said DD. What is that?
DDD is the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And for adults that age out of a high school program at age 21 and go into the regular workforce, there is money for them. They can use it for activities such as swimming. So we work with the DDD to get their money approved, essentially to cover the cost of their swimming so that they can stay in the sport. And then they swim in the Special Olympics meets. So we prepare them through practices, and then they go and swim in the meets with the Special Olympics team.
Fantastic. And again, I look at it, I wasn't aware of the acronym. I get the general concept. But again, if we can take people who have somewhat different needs and experiences and skills, but make them lifeguards, perhaps that gets them into a career, a lifelong career that they are very good at because of their particular talents. That's pretty cool stuff.
It's a great job for them because they're very focused on detail. And, you know, the jobs of a lifeguard on the stand, but also off the stand, go really well with their strengths. So we encourage that for sure.
That's fantastic. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about some of the resources, grants, perhaps, facilities, and equipment you might need for your adaptive aquatics program. Amir, do you want to jump in again?
As far as equipment, it varies. It depends physically, if they're physically disabled or cognitively. I like to assess things before I just grab equipment. So it really does vary.
Any issue with pool temperatures?
Yes, pool temperature can be an issue, especially warm or hot or cold. I usually have it on the warmer side. I feel, usually just so that it's welcoming and they're comfortable. That's all. That's really a lot of it. It's about comfort, even with it comes with equipment and such. Have them comfortable because you want an enjoyable experience.
Got it. And listen, I want to be comfortable too. So I think we all enjoy a warm pool. The only people that don't like the warm pool so much are the people who are swimming laps like professionally, and that's not me. Lisa, from your perspective, is there any special equipment that you've utilized in adaptive aquatics?
Yes, so there's a ton of equipment I've used over the time and also have shown people to use. One of the pieces is called a boat, and basically it's 2 pool noodles and it has a handle and it has a net in the middle that you can lay in when they're trying to learn that process of getting their hips up behind them. And there are fitness belts as well that can help with flotation noodles. It really depends on the child and what they're interested in. So if you can find out what that child is interested in, you can use that to your advantage. So for example, if a child is interested in Spider-Man, maybe you have Spider-Man stickers. And if they're standing on a platform in the pool, they can look for the Spider-Man under the water, or they can get Spider-Man to swim to them. You get a little figurine Spider-Man. It really depends on the person and what they're looking for and what they're interested in. But there are some common core things like the boat. I particularly don't teach with flotation devices with the exception of the boat. I want the kids to learn. I don't want them to have that life vest to pick them up. I want them to be able to learn that skill as part of the swim lessons. And sometimes it can hinder them or they rely on it too much because they become too comfortable with it. There are also things for blowing bubbles that flip in the pool. It's a little disc device. It looks like a flying saucer. And when you blow on it hard enough, it'll flip over. So being able to turn things into a game. And any program that's out there that is struggling, this is something I do as part of my field, is helping the people to reevaluate their programs. Children's Specialized Hospital, I helped them to rewrite their curriculum. And one of the things I told them was, think outside the box. Nothing is cookie cutter. When you're looking at the Red Cross lessons, yes, we're using a lesson plan, but everything can be altered just a little bit to help that one child succeed.
Very cool. And do you have an opinion? Life jackets, no life jackets, are they helpful or not so much?
I think when used with, this is a huge thing in the swim school industry on whether you use, we call it a bubble, a strap around their back, whether you use them or not. And we are a school that actually does use them as a teaching tool, but I can tell you that it takes a lot of training And you have to have instructors that understand how to use it, because yes, you can just clip that belt on them and they can doggy paddle like this all day long. And that's the first thing I say to my instructors when I get in the pool is, if I see kids doggy paddling with their chins up, I'm not going to be happy, because that's not the point of that bubble. The point of the bubble is we work on doing face down like a dead man's float, first skill out of the box before they do anything else, and then floating on their back before we add any sort of kicking and scooping. So they're working on that body position. And for kids that need help with that, putting that bubble on to help them get their back half up is certainly helpful. But if you keep that on the whole time, they don't understand the buoyancy and start to understand buoyancy. So it can be a great tool. We use noodles. We use a lot of things sometimes it's causing distractions, right? Like if a child is fearful, playing with watering cans or any sort of floaty toys can just take their mind off of what we're actually having them do. So we use a lot of things like that within our classes. And same thing, we take the curriculum, and if there's 40 skills in level 1, 2, 3, 4, with a child that needs it, we might skip around and do one thing first instead of another because they are excelling at that and we want them to feel good about what they're doing. We're very hands-on and very particular. We are very lucky, the way the program is designed to only have 1, 2, or 3 kids with each teacher. And we almost always have at least one assistant for every 2 to 3 classes. So the ratio is extremely small. So if we have a child that's struggling or that is, has disabilities that are making them not necessarily be able to be perfect in a regular class, we can have that assistant bounce over and help them. And that's one way that we are really able to integrate almost everyone into our regular program.
So you actually just mentioned the thing I wanted to talk about next was staffing. My guess is when you're dealing with adaptive aquatics, you have a smaller instructor to student ratio than you would in a general population class. Is that correct, or am I off base here?
Oh, I think it really depends on the type of program you're running. We primarily do self-contained adaptive swim, so that's a one-on-one setting for 45 minutes. And we've built in like transition times in the water, acclimation to the environment, all of that. But in regards to if you're doing an inclusion model, I think it depends on the needs. Do you have one swimmer who has learning differences? Do you have 3 swimmers with learning differences? We do small group classes at my swim school that don't go any higher than 4 students anyway. So we probably wouldn't change the ratio. But if we notice, like we've had the conversation with families before, we are seeing your child's progress in the group class. Based on what we're seeing, we think they would benefit from, as we call it, a private lesson, but a self-contained model. And our instructors go through a training called Swim Angelfish. It's a certification program done online. Cindy and Aileen, the founders, are wonderful. They've been out to our facility before, and it uses physical therapy and occupational therapy principles mixed with aquatics. So for our facility, that works really well. But I think like what's been shared here today, you have to think about what's in front of you, what you see, and what's going to work for the students and the staff that you have.
Very interesting. So I guess if I run a facility that does not currently focus on or offer dedicated programs for special needs swimming or adaptive aquatics, and I want to add that, what resources do I need? Are there additional certifications for my staff members? Basically, how do I set this up?
So I know for us, I had the same question, Dave. And we decided to go with Swim Angelfish, and they do a certification program. It's different than the WSI program because there's no hands-on component for the certification. But for my swim school, I chose to add on the in-person training, which was about 5 or 6 hours. And we actually brought in students with learning differences from our swim school that our instructors were trying to figure out how to approach their teaching and what would work best. So we actually got to see what the trainers would do, and we got to try those exercises out ourselves. I always think when you provide adequate training and continuous training for your staff, I think you're going to see better results no matter what kind of swimmer you have. But particularly to adaptive aquatics, we gear towards Swim Angelfish.
Anybody else have experience with Swim Angelfish or another type of thing?
So I actually have gone through many years ago, the Red Cross offered a program on adapted aquatics that I was involved with. I had taken that class in addition to while I was teaching classes and things like that. I myself also go in now and will help aquatic build up a program if they need things, if they need tips and tricks, or they get somebody in their program. I had somebody that was at actually teaching a WSI class once and was like, hey, we have somebody from Colorado and they're struggling with this person. Is there any way you can talk with them on the phone? Sure, reach out to us. That's what we're here for, is to be a sounding board for people. Because Leanne was saying before, in regards to the flotation devices, if they're used appropriately, they can be very effective. And that's how I use them as well. And while I say that I don't typically use them, we do use them in certain instances. And that is similar to what she would be doing as well. And a lot of people. And so it's really just reaching out to different resources of who you know and the population you're serving too. Amira sometimes works in a population where children may not have access to water as easily. And so she might be dealing with a whole different realm of students in addition to just having learning difficulties and things like that.
Amira or Leanne, do you have any experience with any other certification agencies or any other particular resources for the staff, the swim teachers?
Usually, honestly, I've heard of angelfish. I haven't personally taken the angelfish training. I have my own specific training that I'm developing. It's a lot of core ABA concepts. Like with my staff, the first thing I like to do is like preference assessments and things like that. Get them involved so that they know what the kids' reinforcers are going to be, because we want everything to be reinforcing. I personally tell them I want everything reinforcing around the water, because sometimes you deal with fears, and a lot of the parents, they're all about safety, and some of them are really stuck on those safeties. Oh, don't go over there. So, and it's mostly a lot about preference assessments and what do they prefer. So I just apply ABA.
So I've worked over the years. I started in competitive aquatics. Then I kind of developed, I had always done a little bit of learn to swim, but coming from the competitive world, my main goal is to create a lifelong love of aquatics and somehow keep everyone of every ability in aquatics as they get older. When in terms of training, our instructors go through probably 100 hours of training plus lifeguard certification. They're not WSI trained because I've developed my own curriculum kind of over the years. I was not a special education teacher, but one thing that I really believe in today's world is that almost everybody has something. It's very difficult to have a class that has 3 kids with no disabilities, so to speak. So our teachers are taught that every class most likely has some sort of something that's going to make it difficult for you. And how are you going to, I use the same line as David, as like, how do you meet that child where they are? And how do you make sure that they are making progress in the class? You know, a lot of it is speaking to them. I tell my teachers that training is going to be 70% communication and 30% physical, because communicating with those students, swimmers, is really a lot of it. You can't just keep saying, well, make a starfish, make a starfish, make a starfish 42 times. If they don't know what you're saying and they're not going to be able to do it, you have to change something, right? So all of our teachers really go through basic disability training, so to speak, because we almost don't train for a typical student because nobody's going to be typical. And then as our teachers are getting into those 30, 40, 50 hours of training, we start to identify ones that have a true passion for working with certain types of children. So we have actually a few blind children in our program, and we have 2 teachers that just gravitated towards working with them. And for whatever reason, that was just something that became a niche, and that's something they love. And that teacher, the one specifically I'm talking about, she's actually probably on the spectrum or ADHD somewhat herself. So she cannot work at all with ADHD kids because it's too much of one thing. I think identifying people, right? Because you have humans that work for you and then humans that are coming for swimming lessons, and matchmaking, getting the right teacher with the right kids is key. And I think in a lot of bigger programs, there's 8 kids in the class, there's 4 kids in the class, and whatever teacher you get, you get. And we don't do that. We get the family on the phone, ideally, talk through, tell me about your child, tell me about their needs, tell me about their struggles. And then we hand select. So I just don't say there's a Monday 4 p.m. opening. I talk to that parent first and determine, is that teacher going to be a good fit? So that is the big thing I really like to look at is we're not a public program. So we have that ability to pair up each child with the teacher that's going to help them. If they're struggling, we switch the teacher, we switch the time slot, something, right? Switch the pool. That's the beauty of having 6 locations instead of just building one. To be honest, that's one of the reasons I really love having the diversification of different locations. But I think the human side of things is really what someone sometimes is missing, right? It's just, this is the curriculum and go do it. And that's like 10% of our training. You learn that in the first 2 weeks. Then everything else has to get applied after that.
I absolutely agree with you. I come at this from a slightly different point of view. Most of my training is training people who are going to be lifeguards. My perspective here is when we teach a lifeguarding class, it may have 20 or 30 kids in it, which means we have many different lifeguard instructors in the class. So having 3 or 4 lifeguard instructors, if one kid or anyone is not getting it, sometimes just having another person explain it to them gets past that barrier. Sometimes it's just a communication problem. They just aren't understanding the way that particular instructor is presenting it. Roll out instructor number 2. Maybe that solves the problem.
When I was an aquatic program director, and I oversaw Amira and her sister Malika, I will tell you that they were 2 of the top instructors that had worked for us. And people would come and say to me, how do I get in their classes? How do I get in their classes? Because they would see that way that they would teach people in the water. And it's one of the reasons why they resonated in my head. And anytime people are looking for certain things, I can send them certain ways. And I think that once we meet people and we create that core network, it helps us then to send people to the most appropriate place for their child, which is an advantage as well.
Both of the facilities that I've worked at, they have obviously adaptive aquatic, but we have group lessons. They're large groups. Like I can honestly say like maybe 12 per group. Also working with the special needs Olympic team, the Canadian. So we work with large groups and we try to have a 2-to-1 ratio with the instructors, but it doesn't always happen. I always try to tell when I'm training my instructors that you need to know 3 to 4 different ways to do one thing because somebody may learn differently. Obviously, that goes across the board, whether it's gen ed or special ed. And I like to equip them with that. That's just something because, like you said, they might not get it from one person. But if that one person has more than one trick in their bag, let's use it.
Well said. So let's pivot slightly. I think we've all bought into it now. We're all excited. We want an adaptive swim program for our facility. Okay. How do we do that? Are there grants available? We don't need like a whole lot of special equipment, some pool noodles, which you might have, maybe some netting, all good. How do we get started in creating an adaptive swim program for our facility? Jump ball, whoever wants to take it.
I think it's first identifying a need. Where I'm located, we have a lot of students with special needs. We have students on the autism spectrum. And around where I am, there are not many places that offer those kinds of specialized lessons. So I think you first have to identify a need, and then you have to identify a vision. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go the inclusion model? Am I going to go a model where students go into a private lesson and then like emerge into a group lesson? Like, what's the vision there? And then you have to see, like, kind of what Leanne was saying, like, we also match the swimmers to the instructor. We don't just say, there's a Monday at 4 o'clock open or a Tuesday at 6. We say, what are your child's interests? How do they learn? Have they had swimming experience in the past? So I think, quite honestly, because there are so many different learning styles, everyone has a special learning need, whether you have an IEP or a 504 plan or you don't. And I think really if you want to get started, I think you have to look at, all right, are we going off of a curriculum? Are we developing our own curriculum off of ABA principles like Amira is saying? Because that will really go a long way with buying that buy-in from your community. So I think just starting with those couple of steps will really help anyone looking to build a program. In terms of grants, we've done Every Child a Swimmer. We've looked into DDD funding, which we're in the process of now. So we're really looking at different avenues, but a lot of times places don't offer the funding because they're not aware that there's a need for the funding. So I think outreach and doing that can help someone secure funding if needed.
There's also a grant program called the Royd Grant, which is for municipalities that are interested in bringing programs to their facility, inclusion programs, and that grant helps to fund things that they would need for that program, whether it be supplies, creating the program, things like that. And to piggyback on what David said, he is correct. You need to find out where the need is first. One of the things that I previously did was I taught group lessons to children with different abilities. So I would have 5 or 6 kids in the class, all with different abilities. And that was probably one of my most favorite, challenging, and interesting times to date, because we had to lower the instructor participant ratio. Sometimes we had to get parents in the water to be helpful, and figuring out what worked for each of those children was difficult at times, but you took it in stride and you did what you had to do for those individual children so they all got attention as well.
I would say the same. The first thing is to start with staff, and it might just be you at first, or you and 1 or 2 others that you can train, and start just there with what do we need to do to create an environment for adaptive lessons where we have enough knowledge to work with kids of all different needs, right? And after that, honestly, I think there's a need everywhere in the universe for adaptive lessons at this point. So how can we bring it in? And then what is the severity, I guess, right, of each child? One of the programs we've worked with, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's PEAK, P-E-A-K, and some towns have that. What we did there was we had a swim instructor assigned to 2 or 3 special needs, even up to high school and adult level learners. And then we had a volunteer program where we had high school or even middle school kids come in. So we paired up each swimmer in the program with a volunteer and then a swim instructor to sort of help facilitate, because those kids needed one-on-one, but this was a way we could sort of create a group environment so that it wasn't just one-on-one with nobody else in the pool. So there's so many different ways. Some kids totally need just that one-on-one with nothing else going on. But as we all know, finding water that's like that is practically impossible. So how else can we, water is too expensive to have 1 kid in the water at a time. So how do you make it work, knowing that that's the case? I guess it's somewhat being creative. One thing because I have so many different facilities and so many different situations that I'm literally dealing with, it's helped me to understand that nothing is perfect and there's nothing's going to work for everybody. So trying out different solutions or different things with different kids is really key, right? But starting out with a set group of people that knows, I honestly, it's like patience and calm. How do you take a calm approach to swimming and have patience for those kids that, I don't know, not every child with the same diagnosis is going to be even the same in the water, right? So there's really no way. You can't just say, I'm going to train a teacher to work with blind students, or I'm going to train a teacher to work with nonverbal students, because even that has such a huge range of what that child might need.
So I'm just going to see if I can wrap up a conclusion on this. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of special equipment. Pool's pool, warm water is better. Maybe there's some pool noodles. We generally have those. What's special for adaptive aquatics is you're the key. Being able to deal with people that learn differently, being able to cope with that, being able to cope with their parents. That's the key. So just like everything else, your value as a teacher is based on your abilities to cope with different people. And that is the key skill here. What do you folks think? Did I get that right?
I think
Yeah,
you definitely
absolutely.
did.
I have a success story that actually follows right on to that. So I worked with a young man for quite some time whose mother felt that she wanted him to be treated like every other person in the pool. She felt that even though he was on the autism spectrum, that he should be doing what every other child in the world is doing and every other person in the world is doing. And while I understood where she was coming from, I also understood that this child did learn differently and needed things done differently. And so one tool that I used with this swimmer was I kept asking the mom, what do you use at home? What do they use in school? Can I speak with the school? Are they using task cards? Are they using reward charts? She kept telling me no. So for 6 months, this swimmer was struggled and was not successful. And he was taught how to swim at a very young age and grew up at this pool. I begged the mom left and right. I said, please let me use a task card. Please let me use a card where on one side you have Velcro, the other side you have Velcro. Once he completes one task, he can move that Velcro check mark over. She said, it's not going to work, but you can try it. I said, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Day 1, I implemented the tool. The end of the program, he did every single task on that chart successfully. He himself was the one that moved the check mark over. And at the end, I said to the mom, thank you for letting me try something. And now we have something where he's going to be successful. From that day forward, the child listened every single lesson. He just needed it done differently in his way. He obviously uses some type of task chart in school. Maybe the parent wasn't aware of it, but it is really finding out how kids learn, whether they have a disability or not. People just learn differently, like we've been talking about today. Maybe a task chart would work for anybody out there. It doesn't have to be somebody who has a learning difference. And so it's just figuring out what works for them, trial and error.
Lisa, I'm wondering if your task chart, because it required tactile response, that student physically moving a check mark on Velcro, was that a core ingredient of the purpose of that exercise?
Yeah, it could have been. The way that I looked at it was I wanted this child to complete the task. And if the task was pushing off the wall in a streamlined position, and I wanted him to do it 5 times, he knew he accomplished that task by being able to move the check mark over. And he was finished with that task and then was able to move on to the next task, whatever that may have been at the time.
Fantastic. That's a great success story. And I'd love to hear anybody else that has a success story that they'd like to share.
So I do have one. I worked with this swimmer for 8 years. I was the swimmer's 13th swim instructor. And the students started with me when they were 8 years old, maybe 9. So this swimmer, I met someone in college and he was working for a family and he said, "Oh, what are you doing this summer?" I said, "Oh, I'm a swim teacher." And he knew I was studying to be a special education teacher at the time. He goes, "Oh, you have to work with this kid that I nanny for." I said, "I would love it." So I met with the family. I spoke with them for about an hour and a half. We had a conversation in person. We went to the pool we were going to be using. And the mom said, "Sign me up." And first month in the water, we got toes in, and that's all we got. And we
Okay.
talked with the student. There's a big thing in special education called first then language. So first we do this, then we do that. And if a student does something successfully, you give a reinforcement. So for this student, it was a tic tac. They loved mint tic tacs that were white. He would get a tic tac for putting his toes in the water. And it would be an hour lesson at the parent's request. She wanted the hour. He may have put his toes in for 5 minutes, but she wanted to build the relationship, get used to the environment. Then all of a sudden, I said, "Mom, come in the pool with me. Let's see if he'll come in." So mom ended up getting sick, but the nanny came in and he got in the pool. Ever since he got in that pool, we were able to do things. It's about the simple language. Like if I said, "All right, do a flutter kick 25 yards with the red kickboard holding your arm straight," he wouldn't understand that. So we used similar to what Lisa was saying with the rocket boats to work on the horizontal body positioning. I said, I gave it to him, let him explore it. I put a kickboard in to kind of see which one he liked more. And he picked the rocket boat. I said, "Kick." And he just kept kicking. He kicked from the end of 4 feet to the end of 12 feet, a full 25 meters. And I said, "All right." I said, "Again." And we did again. I used some American Sign Language with it. He kicked again. And the nanny got out and I said, "Again." And we swam down. And then he threw the rocket and we worked on like hand over hand arm motions. And it took about a year and a half. But after a year and a half, he was swimming on his own. And I was with this child 4 hours a week at one point. He had 4 hours with me per week. And then we slowly faded it out. But we were doing a lesson one day in the pool. We were doing front stroke, freestyle, backstroke, and we started a little bit of butterfly because he had a strong core and did the dolphin kick. And as I was teaching the student, the mom goes, "You're his 13th instructor, right?" I said, "No, I had no idea." She goes, "You're the only one that's ever been able to even get him to put his face in the water, let alone swim." So she shared this whole success story. He went on to try out for Special Olympics. And it was just, I worked with him for so long and I still talk to the family and I will never forget him.
Amazing. That's great. Wonderful news. Leanne, any story you want to share?
Sure. So this one, we had a class of 3 boys. They were all between ages 4 and 5. And I think we cycled through 3 or 4 teachers who just, to be honest, would get frustrated. The kids had signed up together, so there was not an option to split them. Typically in our program, if we had a threesome that wasn't working super well, we could divide them up and kind of spread out. And we couldn't because they were signed up together. So we tried a few different teachers. We really struggled with them just saying no to everything, right? And all three had attention issues, so we had a lot of safety. Going back to the bubbles, the floats that we clip around them, one reason I love those for especially kids with disabilities is that you can have all three kids in the water. And if you're specifically working with one, the other two have that bubble on. So they're safe and they can be on the wall, blowing bubbles, doing things like that. But going back, we couldn't figure out anything that would work with these kids. And just coincidentally, we developed a new reward system and we call it Badge Quest. My team and I developed little like pins, badges, and think Disney lanyard with you collect all your different pins on it. And all we needed was a system, a reward system that would work. And as soon as those kids found out about Badge Quest, we launched it in October of 2025, gave out their lanyards, started earning badges, and all three of those kids instantly locked in. So even the teacher wasn't working, right? We got lucky that that was something we had at the time, but if that's something you don't have, you can easily develop a sticker system or some sort of reward system that works really well. But it was a very like thankful moment for us because it was a class that took up a lot of our time. You know, we have about 800 kids in our program right now, and those three were taking up a lot of discussion time. So I think that's something we do also do though in our program is every kid, you would never know we have 800 kids because every one of them has a spreadsheet that's at the pool with us that has, we call them red notes, like a red flag. So all of our students are on the spreadsheet and every single student has a red note, if necessary, that says exactly what works with them and doesn't work with them. I think that's also like identifying what works and what doesn't, regardless of what the disability is. So that, and then making sure if you do have a substitute or if you feel the need to switch things around, everyone in on the pool deck in the water is going to know what works with that child or what does not work or what to look out for. So I think communication and note taking is also crucial to the success, especially with kids that have a red note. And going, like I said, almost every kid in our program has a red note of some sort. So if you really think about that, it's just the way that we have to learn to teach in general is to pivot anytime it's not working and don't give up. Try to find a different way to say it, different way to do it, different reward system until something works with each child.
I'll even include that as part of communication because you're communicating what, notes from one instructor who's ever going to take over the next day or whatever happened last week. By continuing that communication, it makes things clearly better for all the participants and the staff. Amira, I want to give you.
Yes, actually, as I was thinking, we've been talking a lot about like cognitive disabilities, and I just wanted to tell my success story of mine that is physical disability. I was working with, it was a while ago, I was working with a swim school for a moment. I won't name names, they're defunct. But yes, there was a 73-year-old woman who just wanted to swim with her grandchildren in the Caribbean. And she had went through a few instructors and she just couldn't find her niche in the water. I'm not gonna lie, I've noticed a lot when it comes to people who need physically, who need help in that department, that most instructors will go to the basics. And not that they shouldn't, but they go straight to legs, arms kicking and turning for freestyle. And her disability was that her neck was fused. So she could not turn. But every instructor kept telling her she had to turn because that's the way you're supposed to do freestyle. They didn't take heed into it. So I basically had to show her another technique on how something that she was already doing in the water. And literally it took a few weeks and she was ready for the Caribbean with her grandchildren. She was very excited. She just wanted to keep up with them. And she's 73 years old. She wanted to embrace things with her family. She didn't want to stay out the water anymore.
That is just so amazing. So we've gone from teaching swimming to helping people achieve their dreams. That is the teacher that is going to be remembered forever. That is why teachers are so awesome. We all remember that teacher that we had that had the biggest impact on us. And whether it's adaptive aquatics, and there's exactly how it gets its name, we had to adapt the exercises to teach this individual the skill. Absolutely awesome. Amazing success stories. You guys are all fantastic.
Yeah, adaptive aquatics has been around for so many years, but I think it's come to the forefront now because of everything has come to the forefront with adapting. So when we look at parks and recreation, how can we adapt to people coming into our parks or into our facilities? While we've always had adaptations, it's just becoming more prevalent now. And so that 73-year-old woman, she had her own form of special need, and it was just figuring out a way to connect with her. And that's how the foundations of adaptive aquatics has exploded now. Like in Leanne's setting, where she does more inclusion programs, all the kids want to just be kids like every other kid out there because they are. That's what they are. They're kids. Every kid is a kid. And so it's just a matter of finding out what works for each kid so they can be successful, or a 73-year-old woman, or the swim team kid that is having struggling focusing, finding out what it is to get them there.
So cool. Now, while all those are amazing successes, I also want to learn from some lessons that maybe we can learn from things that didn't go as planned. What can we learn from, I don't want to call them mistakes necessarily, things that didn't go as planned? Anyone have anything they want to share in that vein?
Actually do. There's a few, but there was one specific instance where a child, he was on the spectrum, obviously, but he was on the spectrum. And his mom, he could move around in the water. He enjoyed the water. But I find parents can be more hindering than the child's disability. Mom, she kept pushing, like, he can do this, he can do that, he can do this. But I wasn't seeing that. And when they tell me that, what I usually do, I ask the parents to come in the water and show me, because maybe they're not doing it for me, but I want to see how you can get them to do it if this is what they can do. And I can honestly say, when it comes to disabilities, it's usually our parents that are the hinderers, not necessarily disabilities.
Too true. I've seen that myself on a couple occasions. David, Leanne, Lisa, anything you want to share?
I'd say less is more. So I think when I was first starting out as an instructor, I would watch other instructors teach. And I would have a note on my phone and I would say, "Oh, I like this drill. Oh, they're using this that way." And I'm like, "Oh, because I saw it one time, I can do it that way and I can make them do it instantly." But I think the biggest thing with teaching adaptive aquatics and just aquatics in general is patience, and less is more sometimes. So with the swimmer I shared about previously, took us months just getting toes in the water, just to get in the water and not do anything. But look where it ended up. So I think a big lesson for me is patience, because I'm someone that when I see something, I want to do it all. I want to be the person that can do it all and do it all now. That's not reality, and that's not anyway aquatics. So take your time, ask questions, less is more.
To go along with what Amira said with parents, we had a parent a couple weeks ago came and said, "We've been in lessons for 2 months and I'm not seeing much." And we went back to her and said, "Don't you realize that's 4 hours total in the water?"
And I actually would like to piggyback on what David said about sometimes less is more. I myself have always been an instructor that I'm like, "Oh yeah, bring that child to me, I'll figure it out." But it's okay to accept the fact that you might not be the best fit for that person. And maybe finding an instructor that would be a better fit for that child or adult or whoever the person is, and having an open conversation with that instructor and explaining what's going on and saying, "Hey, I noticed that you do things like this, I do things like this." Asking for help, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture as to how the child can be the most successful. Even though you might be a great instructor, it just might not be a good fit personality-wise for whatever reason, and that's okay.
100% agree. And again, it doesn't have to be adaptive aquatics or special needs. That applies to everybody. So again, if you're not meshing with one particular student, have one of your other staff give it a go and see if that solves the problem.
Me and my sister, Lisa knows my sister, we're twins, and we've gone through the same trainings for years. Yet she's done the angelfish training. It's the only reason why I know about it. And I haven't. Our techniques are completely different. So when I haven't reached someone, I'm always like, "Malika, what do you got for me? What can you do and what would you change?" And usually it really does work.
Do you give parents homework to do with their kids after you see them in the pool? Is there something that the parents can do at home to help facilitate the learning process?
There's so many different things they can do at home in the bathtub.
I was gonna actually say, yeah, I've had parents that never put water on. They would just get a washcloth and wipe their face, especially if they're gonna have sensory issues that can really hinder a lesson.
Listen, again, I thank you all so much for participating today. This has been the kind of first one of our new podcast series for 2026. Our objective is to do at least one quarterly. And then in 2027, we're hoping to increase it to once a month. So that will also become a membership benefit as well. So between the job board, our legislative initiatives, the bathing suit drive, the networking at the Garden State Water Safety Summit, all these things are great. We would love for you to become members of the New Jersey Safe Swim Alliance. Thank you so much for participating today. I hope you learned a lot. Please make sure you like, follow, and share when we see these on social media so that we can get the word out. It'll be hosted both on our website as well as you'll see clips on various social media sites. Again, thank you so much. I'm Dave Coates, your host. Be safe in the water.